I think the point about this war against Iran is that the timescale has been foreshortened very, very considerably. Could be a year or two, that's all. And the other interesting thing, and this is why this yuan situation is so important, we're just seeing the death of the petrodollar. That's now dead as a result of this, killed off by America, for goodness sake, replaced by the yuan. And the yuan is already prepared for this, with Shanghai Gold Exchange vaults in Hong Kong and also Saudi Arabia. And they're also talking, I saw something, whether it's right or not, that they'll probably open one in Iran after this kerfuffle. And you've got CIPS, the Chinese International Payment System, which allows you to exchange currencies without going through the dollar. And that's been working very, very effectively. And you're going to get the whole of the Middle East turning its back on the dollar and using CIPS and using the yuan. I mean, if you look at the quantity of dollars held by foreigners, I mean, on the US Treasury's own tick figures, there's something like 44 trillion last time I looked, of which roughly half is invested in equities, which I have to say is a speculative investment. And as soon as the equity market turns south, what happens to that? It's out. Quite simple. Not only that, but what we are seeing with higher inflation taking off over this, particularly the second half of this year, you're going to see bond yields rising very significantly. We now got, I understand that you've just crossed the 39 trillion government debt barrier. 39 trillion. I mean, it's unfundable now. It really is. The only way in which can be funded is basically cash for cash. In other words, what the Fed will be doing was it will be increasing, it will be pumping out cash, pumping up bank reserves to put currency into the economy, and it'll be financing it off short-term USD Treasury debt, cash for cash. It's called money printing. And this is going to be huge. Because as you get higher interest rates, all the zombie companies fall over. The banking system, in part, gets into real difficulties, particularly where they've funded private equity, if you like, and shadow banking, which is already going sour, as we've seen with the, with various funds, not prepared to meet withdrawals. The sort of private credit funds. So, what more do you want to know? It's all going to fall over. And the foreigners are going to try and get the hell out of the dollar, and the dollar will go down. And will it last 2 years? I mean, it's interesting. If you look at what happened in the post First World War years in Germany, when the Reichsmark lost all its purchasing power between 1918, get the century right, 1918 and 1923, the similarities, I mean, okay, it's different circumstances and, different triggers and all the rest of it, but the circumstances are so similar in terms of the politics. It's the politics that will run the currency into the ground, not economics. Even though this, the macroeconomic analysis is faulted and all the rest of it, it is actually a non-science. Replaced classical economics, which had a better idea. I mean, when you look at Germany in 1918 to 1923, the economists in those days had a better grasp of economics than the economists today. We just look at people like Paul Krugman and Stiglitz, I think, in an earlier time, reckoned that Venezuela, and this was under Chavez, should stimulate its economy. He thought it was a good policy. Well, we know what's happened there. The currency's it's gone into hyperinflation. Basically, we know less today how to deal with this situation than they knew in post-First World War Germany. And that should send shivers down your spine. I mean, there's no way they can stop the collapse of these fiat currencies. They're coming to the end. And it's going to be a period, I mean, we had no idea on timing. We could have sort of penciled in, well, it probably takes anything between 3 and 5 years. It's now beginning to look like 2 years, possibly. And then if we're lucky. It could happen overnight, theoretically, but I think that's unlikely. I hope it's unlikely. And of course, where that leaves gold and silver, well, gold is real money. It is final settlement for everything. Credit is not final settlement. Credit is a promise of final settlement. It's not actually final settlement. A currency is credit. It is not final settlement, though you'll find that there will be enough people to try and tell you, yes, that is final settlement. No, it is not. In law, it is not. It's the credit that's going to go down the tubes, which includes, and if you think that something isn't credit and you find it goes down the tubes, you'll learn the hard way. I mean, if you look at the purchasing power of gold, fluctuates a bit, but over long periods of time, it's relatively constant. So what we're seeing is not gold going up, but we're seeing the dollar and other currencies going down. And the Chinese are now in a position where they can protect their currency by putting it on a gold standard, having set up SIPs, having set up vaults outside China, in Hong Kong, and also in Saudi Arabia, etc. They could literally say, right, for trade settlement purposes, the exchange rate for yuan is this in gold, and that's it. They literally just do it overnight. They don't want to do it in such a way that they are obviously associated with creating chaos in the Western currency system. What they will do is they will do it as a defensive measure. So they will pick their timing on that basis. But they could do it tomorrow. China, they have this approach. They've been around for 5,000 years. Why hurry? And the other thing is that, they watch America making all these strategic mistakes. Why interrupt? It's fashionable to describe it as Sun Tzu, but actually it's President Xi. He stands there with his head slightly to one side with a nice smile on his face, Mr. Trump, yes, we welcome you, Mr. President. Do come. Well, we'll give you a nice Chinese meal and then piss off. That's been postponed, I think, from April, hasn't it? But the interesting thing is that you could see the steps that China has been taking. The interesting one was silver, because if you go back to when China decided that they were going to restrict, almost ban, rare earth exports, and this was Trump turning around saying 145% tariffs. I mean, there were several tariffs underneath the one he said, I think. So Chinese turned around and said, well, if that's the way you want to play it, then no rare earths. Oops. That was in the end of last September. What we weren't told was it wasn't just rare earths. It was also silver. And it was literally within just about 2 weeks after that, slightly more than 2 weeks and a few days, that there was a liquidity crisis on the London bullion market. You found that the lease rate shot up overnight to something like 40%. China wasn't supplying any more silver into the West. I mean, quite simply, you could say that the reason for that is that America had just announced that they'd put silver onto the critical minerals list. So why should China supply silver into the West for it only to end up on America's stockpile? Not that it exists yet, but the one that they would hope to build. We're not going to do that. That's one way of looking at it. The other way of looking at it is that they realize that they've got to hang on to their silver, they've got to hang on to their gold, keep importing it, necessary, because that is the future. That is the future of money. Again, I mean, it has always been money, but again, it's going to be there as final settlement. And if you ain't got it, you've got a problem. So it's only a matter of time before China turns around and says, right, that's it. This is the rate. We're fixing the yuan, the international, the offshore yuan, to gold at the following rate. And that'll be it. Now, what they do with the domestic yuan, I'm not too sure. The last metallic standard they had was a silver standard, which was up until, I think, 1935. They could go back onto a silver standard for the domestic economy because they've got exchange controls. So you've got two yuan, as it were. You've got an offshore and you've got an onshore. So they could do that, I think. It's not quite as difficult as what we found in the past, trying to run a dual standard, with a fixed exchange rate between gold and silver. I just think that they might consider that because central banks at the moment take the view on gold that we've got the gold and we don't want to part with it. I think the idea that people can exchange their yuan for gold is actually quite a difficult concept. for any central bank to allow, to permit. I mean, they've just moved away from gold standards and all the rest of it. They would rather do a Bretton Woods type deal, I think, which essentially is what I'm suggesting that they will do with, by having, the vaults where gold can only be exchanged for yuan and vice versa, and how they could fix it, let us say, just for international trade settlement, which essentially would be country to country, if you like, nation to nation. So it's rather like a Mark II version of Bretton Woods.